Members of Council, our next delegation is Chief of Police Paul Martin and Inspector David Saliba from 17 Division, Durham Regional Police Service to provide a presentation concerning community safety initiatives. Chief, you have a number of key people from your organization in the room tonight. Could you introduce all of them for us?
Yes, I can, Your Worship. First of all, we have Superintendent Dave Brown, who's in charge of our crime management section. Superintendent Todd Rollauer, who is my executive officer. And then, late to the game, but nevertheless here, Superintendent Mark Morissette, who's in charge of some of our operational divisions, including Central East Division here. And Deputy Chief Jaswal is also joined us. And I will introduce, of course, Dave Selby, our Director of Corporate Communications, and Inspector Saliba of Central East Division.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good evening. As stated, I am the Chief of Police, Paul Martin. Thank you, Your Worship, for the invitation to come here tonight, and to Oshawa Council and to ladies and gentlemen present. What we're going to do is we've been asked to come here tonight to speak to some of the current issues that are facing the crime activity in the Oshawa area specifically. This will be similar to what we did with Regional Council, but specific to Oshawa. Then we'll discuss some of the current issues and future challenges that are facing the police service in this community. But I'm going to turn it over to Inspector Saliba to talk about some of the specifics here in Oshawa.
Thank you, Chief. Your Worship, I'll walk you through a high-level summary of our crime trends here in Oshawa. Talk a little bit about the tremendous work being done by our men and women of the Durham Regional Police Service. As you know, crime rates in Ontario and Canada have generally been edging downward for many years. However, many jurisdictions began seeing increases in 2016, and those increases continued in 2017. In Oshawa, we saw a dramatic increase in property crimes this past year. That's the red line at the top of the graph. I'll explain the reasons for this shortly. We had less prominent increases in both crimes against persons, which is the thin blue line on the graph, of 1%, and other criminal code violations, the green line, which is 8%, which include things like fail to comply with conditions, breach of probation. There were several factors for the increase in property crime. As mentioned, property crime increased in 2017. It was up 19% in Oshawa. Break and enters rose 20%, driven by entries into self-storage facilities, sheds, and garages. About 19% of our break-ins in our division last year were at storage units. About 12% involved sheds and garages targeting bicycles and tools. Another major driver was theft from motor vehicles, but we were able to arrest and charge 36 offenders and cleared a lot of these cases. The third driver of property crime increase involved theft of e-bikes, motorcycles, and other non-conventional vehicles like snowmobiles, ATVs, and dirt bikes. The fourth area that was increased was reported shoplifting incidents at major malls and shopping areas. Shoplifting incidents increased by 37% in 2017. In terms of crimes against persons, we saw a 1% increase in Oshawa in 2017. When we saw the level of street-level robberies increase last summer, we formed an investigative team. The end result was Project Rockaway, which led to the arrest of 16 young people and 1 adult. More than 50 charges were laid, and street-level robberies and assaults dropped by about 50%. One concerning area for us is the increase in reported sexual assaults. This increased from 107 in 2016 to 133 in 2017. That's 26 additional incidents. We're looking at this disturbing increase, but it may be affected by more victims feeling comfortable in reporting this crime than in previous years. One of the biggest concerns we have as a police service is the increase in homicides. We generally get between 4 and 6 each year, but last year we had 9 across the region. We generally see 1 or 2 homicides each year in Oshawa. In 2017, 5 homicides occurred, and we've already had 2 in 2018. We're hoping this is not a trend and that we will return to historical levels. Before I hand it back to the Chief, I just want to touch on some of our operational successes over the past few months. Our recent In the Zone school safety blitz held in Oshawa and across the region resulted in over 1,100 tickets being issued. We made an arrest in our first homicide case of 2018. A recent human trafficking investigation involving several local residents resulted in 4 persons charged and some assistance and support for 2 young female victims. I now ask the Chief to come back and to review our current and future challenges. Chief?
Thank you, Inspector Saliba. I'll go over some of the challenges that we're facing and what we expect to face both as a service and generally in policing. As indicated by the inspector, several high-profile homicides have occurred and are active investigations in Oshawa. Let me begin by acknowledging the concerns in this community over crime and safety issues. I know there is angst and uncertainty in the community, given the number of high-profile investigations currently underway or concluded. From the Rory Hache homicide and the disappearance of Cameron Bailey, I want you to know that we are thoroughly conducting investigations in every incident, and we will take these investigations to their natural conclusion. Although I'm not able to discuss active cases with you, I can assure you that we will keep the community informed of the major investigations underway and the results as they come in. We'll provide updates on a regular basis, and anyone who wants to receive media releases directly can send us their email address, or they can follow us on our website, Twitter, or Facebook. We promise to keep you informed and work through these cases. I can assure you, however, that for a large city, I know Oshawa is a large city, experienced some large city problems, but it is still one of the safest large cities in Canada. So what are the challenges ahead? Many of you are probably familiar with Bill 175, which is in the provincial legislature. This is the most significant reform to policing and the Police Services Act in over 20 years. This will affect police oversight bodies and the services themselves. The Safer Ontario Act has passed second reading in the House and is now before the Standing Committee on Justice Policy. Public hearings are set for just over a month from now. We are currently monitoring the progress, and we will comply with the new rules, but there's still a lot of unanswered questions with this legislation at this point. Some other future challenges, the new marijuana legislation is expected to come into effect in late summer of this year. The clock is ticking on whether police services will be given the time, training, and according to our Police Services Board, perhaps the money for the training required to prepare for the new legislation. We will continue to respond to the unique needs of our aging population and the increasing calls for missing persons and persons suffering from mental illness. Finally, with the growing number of vehicles on our roadways, and we heard a little bit about it today from Councillor Neal, each year we're keeping our roads safe, and it is one of our top priorities in our business planning. Now that's a very high-level overview, both of the statistics and some of the challenges that we're facing, but I'm certainly open to questions as well with the panel here, should Council have any questions for us. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. Questions to the Chief. Councillor McQuaid-England.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor. First off, I'd like to discuss and maybe talk about the fact that you did hire a retired deputy chief to probe respect in the workplace. So I'm wondering how that is going, and where do we sit in the process with that as it relates to harassment, sexual harassment, and other things that may be or may not be happening within the police force.
Well, with respect to that particular review, we're still waiting for some results on that. What I can tell you with respect to the police service, what we intend to do is, we've had some discussions with the Police Services Board, but the one thing that we will be doing in a general sense is we will be refreshing our policies with respect to respect in the workplace, workplace discrimination, harassment, And we will once again go through training everyone in the service, as we did some time ago, about what is respect in the workplace, what is workplace discrimination, harassment, and what is not, because we actually probably have more complaints that are not workplace discrimination, harassment than are. So in the case of performance management, that is not workplace discrimination or harassment. So we have to provide some training and make sure we've gone through dramatic change in leadership over the last few years, and we continue to do so. So it's incumbent upon the service and the leaders that are in the service to make sure that our people are properly trained and can deal with these issues in the most appropriate way.
And sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, you were.
No, I was just going to say, and once we have any further results, then we'll make the adjustments as recommended.
Okay. In terms of, I know that you can't speak to the possibly, I'm not sure if it's still ongoing, the investigations about 2 top Durham police officers who were accused of harassment, and some of the issues that occurred with that. But will this probe and the actions that you're taking, do you believe that it will help really clearly underline what is appropriate behavior and what is not appropriate behavior in a workplace situation? Because I do hear from rank and file, from some female police officers who say they've heard some very shocking things, and I just don't understand how in 2018, and you guys are leaders in this, how we're still explaining to certain men that it's not appropriate to talk about your penis at work, or it's not appropriate to, so like, is that, like, I'm sorry to get kind of graphic here, but is that part of a culture shift too that needs to happen within the police force?
Well, the unfortunate thing is that policing is a microcosm of society, and you touched on some of the issues within society, broader society. So unfortunately, we're not immune to some of the issues that occur in the broader community. What I can tell you is that what you're referring to is one is fairly historic. It stretches back to 2011, 2012, and in fact, there were 2 investigations as a result of that. That has been resolved. It's been presented to the Police Services Board. The second instance is actually now in the public forum. It's gone to a tribunal. So at this point, I can't comment on it any more than that, other than to say it is in the public forum now, and I know that there is media interest and public interest, and people can go because it's an open tribunal. So that's what I can say about that. With respect to what I can say categorically is that we will not tolerate workplace discrimination, harassment in the service, and notwithstanding sometimes the negative view of the police service, we have to bring this out in the open. We have to deal with these issues so that our people do feel safe and at work and can come to work as their whole selves. So we will continue to pursue this, notwithstanding some of the views that we get as a result of it being public, but that has to be done, and we will continue to do that.
And as part of the training and updating of training is making sure that silence is also complicit to the problem, so that if you're an individual who is witnessing something that's occurring and you stay silent, you are also part of that problem? Is that something because that seems to be one of the broader issues when we talk about misogyny, sexual harassment, and things in the workplace, that silence is complicit. So is that something that's going to be covered within your new training to ensure that people understand that you must speak up for your members as well, because those women or those individuals facing it might not have the ability to come forward?
Yeah, in the broadest sense, it would probably cover 3 categories. First of all, those who might engage in those types of activities and the activities that are prohibited. It would engage or certainly inform victims of what their rights are and what they should do and how they should report it, and the mechanisms available to them. And then number 3, yes, it would address those that would potentially witness that and what their responsibilities and their obligations are to report that and to deal with that appropriately.
That's a refreshing take, and I do know that your diversity plan, I know you're in the early stages of implementing it, and there's a lot of work to be done there, but I do appreciate that that has been done, and you are going to be looking at a broader perspective and trying to bring diversity into the workforce, and how that diversity can then change the image of the community with policing. So just a few questions now in terms of some things that I'm concerned about, but also it was highlighted the reason why. So sexual assault is up in terms from 107 to 133, and of course all of us would want that to be zero. But is it the change in climate? It was mentioned. Do you think the change in climate is helping, and the fact that we have gone through that review with some of the cases that might have been misfiled, so women are starting to feel a little bit more trust in coming to the police? Is that what we think?
Well, I'll start with Dave, and if there's anything else he wants to turn over to me, I'll go from there. Thank you.
I think you've hit the nail on the head for the most part. I think these social awareness campaigns have really hit home with a lot of victims. The victims are coming forward, and they recognize that the police are there and that we are there to work with them. We have done that on a number of different levels, whether it be through our sexual assault unit, domestic violence unit, and we have demonstrated our ability to work with the victims very, very closely. And I think that through the social awareness campaign, that has really assisted us as well.
Okay. And then there was also an audit done in terms of some of the cases that were maybe either, I don't know what the word is, like misidentified, and in terms of some of those sexual assault cases, which related to transfers to other jurisdictions and other things. And I did talk to you about and ask this question at the region, but I'm wondering if you could highlight here the changes that have been made in terms of sort of the sexual assault reporting and how we're filing them to make sure that they are adequately represented.
Yes, thank you. What we did was initially we did an internal review, so we went back and a number of police services went back and looked at their sexual assault files for the last 5 years, roughly. It varied from service to service. What we did when we decided right from the onset is that our current records management system goes back to 2005, so we went and did a 12-year review. So we reviewed every sexual assault case that was deemed unfounded, and we did find a number of different things. And the unfortunate thing is sometimes we're our own worst enemies as far as we become slaves to how the computer systems categorize things. And as I said at Regional Council, there was a number of things that we found, and that is one of the things that would happen is if a sexual assault was reported to the Durham Regional Police and it happened in Toronto or York Region, we would send that file to that police service, which is standard practice to do an investigation as they would to us. The problem is we would file it as unfounded here in Durham Region. Well, that's not the case. It hasn't been determined to be unfounded. It's been transferred to another police service. So there's a number of different instances like that where we could reclassify some of those things. What we are looking at, too, is the next stage, when we've already gone through one iteration of it, is now we're working with the community partners, a number of different social service agencies and human service agencies that deal with these types of issues, sexual assault, and counseling agencies for women, to make sure that they work with us to really help us to improve the system as we go forward. So we had one review in the latter part of 2017, and I believe the next review of some files, they're anonymized, but some files just to make sure that we're doing the right things is scheduled for May. And then from there, that committee will determine if there needs to be greater frequency, what we need to do, and where we need to go from there.
Okay, and then in terms of your relationship with Durham College and UIT and sexual assault on campus, because there are internal processes and policies within the college and the university, and then the actual legal processes with yourself. Was Durham Regional Police part of reviewing UIT's sexual assault policy and the process that they have internally within? Were you guys invited in on that, a part of that?
Not to my knowledge. I don't know. No, not to the deputy's knowledge either, so we haven't been asked.
So there's still a bit of a review going on in terms of that. And as a former student leader, I'm not sure if you're aware, but I'll ask it. Are you aware that there are sort of internal trials that take place on campus as it relates to sexual assault that are outside the frame of the legal system and also the police? And in the past, it was, especially with other universities as well, it was encouraged to go through that process. So I would really hope that the police services would look into this from the perspective of how we can protect victims of sexual violence and how we can be partners with universities and colleges on this, and maybe sort of review those policies to say, here are some things that I think there needs to be some changes on. I think you guys would be an adequate and helpful support to some of the internal issues that are occurring there. And then in terms of human trafficking, I know that's something that's been a huge problem within the lakeshore communities along the 401. Do we have we have the ability, if like to based on pictures, if to sort of identify particular hotels, motels, etc. Do we have that sort of softwaring capability if someone where we're tracking the different types of hotel rooms, what they look like, so then to help us find where victims might be coming from?
If you're talking about software that can identify either like facial recognition or some sort of recognition, it's still relatively in its infancy.
Okay.
That type of software. What we are looking at is working with. In fact, we've had a couple of conversations as of late, working with a couple of different startup organizations, companies, and some established ones, quite frankly, that are improving that technology at a really a breakneck speed. So we are looking at that, and there is some possibility to do just that. What we have been doing in absence of that up to this point is really working with the owners and the managers of these hotels, especially along the 400 series highways and along the highways in our community, to make sure that, first of all, they're educated on what to look for, the signs and of human trafficking, and then educating them into their responsibilities to report to us. And in fact, we have had a great deal of success through our human trafficking unit and through the efforts that we've made throughout the divisions, including Oshawa and Whitby division specifically, with those efforts. And there has been a great working relationship with the managers and the hotel staff along the 401.
And do you think there might be an opportunity also now that Oshawa has become a teaching city and we have a university that is works on technology and stuff, to maybe come up with something where we can start categorizing what the different hotel rooms look like, so that way it can be cross-referenced to images of possible people that are being human trafficked, so that you know, because I know the technology is getting better, but there may be some opportunities. I would suggest maybe speaking with our city manager and to see whether or not, as a teaching city, maybe there's something that we can get involved in with the criminology students and with technology students to try and help further that along for you, to see if there's like an app or something where people, when they're in hotel, do you know, something that could help you with that process?
We do actually have an agreement with Durham College, UIT, Ryerson, and we are looking at an incubator and accelerator for public safety.
Perfect.
And it'll definitely be one of the things. Technology is obviously one of the things that we can leverage. So we already have that framework in place. It's about working at the details at this point in time, but we are working towards just those goals.
Well, then I definitely would say speak to the city manager about our new teaching cities initiative to see if there's any memorandums that can be signed. Sure. In terms of the changes to the police oversight bodies that are going to be coming forward, what are some of the changes that are being presented?
Well, as I said, there's still a lot of detail to come. This bill, actually Bill 175, is an omnibus bill, so there's several, it affects several pieces of legislation. With the oversight, there will be changes to the SIU. One of the major changes with SIU is that they currently, if they're no longer a police officer, that they don't necessarily investigate them. And then they have limitations on only investigating sworn police officers. Some of those things are going to change as recommended under the new bill. The OIPRD will change. There will be an inspector general, and that will be able to the powers will be expanded to look at police services boards as well as auditing police services. So there's going to be a number of different changes. The one thing with the bill is it's kind of a framework type bill, and then the rest is going to be done in regulation. So I'm still waiting to see a lot of what the changes are going to be, and what the devil will be in the details, so to speak. So there's a lot to see at this point in time, but if the legislation goes unchanged at this stage.
And in terms of the SIU, the sort of changes that take place, that would mean that sort of retired police officers or would now be included because they are still getting a pension and or getting, so expanding it out to ensure that those individuals would be included. Is that kind of the goal of it, or?
Well, I believe the spirit behind the fact that they will continue to investigate police officers, whether they're employed or not, is, again, to maintain the transparency and the integrity of the investigation, as opposed to a police service investigating it. Now you have an oversight agency that will continue to do that, whether they're employed or not.
Unfortunately, the shooting last night in South Oshawa is not the first shooting. I mean, we had that other one that happened along Ritson and Simcoe, or was that a stabbing or a shooting? It's a shooting. The one that occurred right across from Bobby Orr School. It was there's the stabbing. And then there are neighbors, so I live around the corner from that and around the corner from when the shooting took place. And I had a lot of neighbors messaging me last night who live in those buildings who are very scared about the circumstances of what took place, and about the safety of their children. I know that there's nothing really that can sort of be, because it's ongoing, but what do we tell those members of the community? Because it feels, with everything that's happened, and maybe it's just the span of time of what's happened with Rory, with everything that's going on, it's starting to really hit the core of the security for the community. So you touched on it earlier, but what do we do about that?
Well, what I can say is I can't speak to every case, but, and this one is very early in the investigative stages. But what I can say about most of these cases, and I would suggest that at least initial information would suggest what I'm saying is going to be true. This is not random. I would suggest to you that most people within our communities that would exercise normal vigilance and live everyday or common lifestyles probably wouldn't come across this. So I would suggest to you that what's happened is not random, and that I can assure the community, if you're taking normal precautions and you're carrying out your normal day-to-day business, chances are very unlikely that you're going to see any of this trouble. Yes, the biggest concern always is especially when you're talking about something like firearms, is that it is sometimes what happens is people get caught in the crossfire, so to speak. That is definitely a very big concern for us and for me personally, but for the police service. But what I can say is that in these cases, any normal or regular resident is not going to be experiencing this type of event.
Okay, thank you.